I always like to say, like, you can expedite relationships from you and a guest to you and a listener when you're sitting with someone in their ears for an hour, 2 hours. And I think that's what podcasting is.
Hi, my name is Jake Hurwitz, and I sat down with Casey Adams and Jonathan Baer to answer a question every podcaster needs to hear. The show builds the relationship, but what builds the audience?
The people who say like, oh, if I'm posting, more than once a day, like I'm going to be bothering people or spamming people, they don't quite understand how the algorithms work. If you have a big fan who's opening up Instagram 10 times a day, they might want to see your content 10 times a day. And if you don't post 10 times a day, you are not serving that fan sufficiently.
I saw this clip a while back from Alex Hormozi where, he was talking to someone, they're putting out 5 clips a week, and he's like, I'm doing 500. Like, you just need to increase your output. It's like shots on net, right?
Instagram is a massive LLM. The more data you give it, the better it is. It gives you back. And you have to dominate Instagram. I don't give a shit like what space you're in. Humans go to bed at night scrolling Instagram, or they like are waiting in line at Starbucks scrolling Instagram. Like almost everyone's there. So a good place to really begin is like, what the hell are we actually each building here? Because we're building very different things. Like you guys are about building tech, I'm building a network. And I use both of your technologies.
Yeah.
We're trying to all reach the same.
Who do you like better?
Look, you guys are both, we're all early. But everyone's building some powerful stuff here. Seriously. The fact that we're like all trying to reach the same people with the similar type theses and messages is really important. But it does make the most sense to start with, like, well, what are we actually building? Like you're building overlap, you're building listener. Do you call it overlap AI or just overlap?
It depends who I'm talking to, but just overlap.
Just overlap.
Yeah.
Listener.com or just listener?
Either works.
All right.
Listener AI.
Yeah. We have that internal.
If you need to raise an extra $8 million, just throw
exactly. To investors, you can add it.
Yeah. Talk to us about listener. What are you building?
Yeah. First off, so grateful you brought us here today. It's funny because we've talked over the years, and the fact that we can all come together, kind of chat about our different points of view, I think is going to be super interesting. But, listener.com, we launched coming up on a year now. And, the simple thesis is building the AI-powered analytics and intelligence layer for modern podcast publishers. And we really like to emphasize this idea of modern publishers because I think we can all agree here that, podcasting is not a new medium, right? It's been here historically for over 20 years, but the new way that publishers produce and launch podcasts is so different than it was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah.
So for us, it's about bringing what we view as like the centerpiece of the infrastructure, which is the audio, the video, and the short form content, and even things like newsletter that make up the new media infrastructure that podcast, in my opinion, is like the container of that. And that's what we're really looking to do, is kind of provide that analytics intelligence layer. And more recently is the campaign reporting layer, where now we have a lot of large scale publishers that are managing all of their omni-channel campaigns on Listener. And that's been the biggest sort of new launch that we're excited about that I think is going to define the next year for us. But we're early, as we all are. And we've been at it for about 12 months, and I won't get into it now, but I've had my own podcast and I've been in the industry for over 8 years. So I think I've seen it from a lot of different angles, and that kind of gives us, in my opinion, our unique go-to-market. So that's what we're up to.
I always think of it as like, first, it blows my mind. It's 2026 right now, that not only brands, it just feels like everyone in the space always has and still just measures podcast success on like, how many monthly downloads do you get? And there's so much wrong with that. Like, it's just so not, I don't know, it's not a full body picture of the success of your show. And finally, with listener.com, someone is out here saying like, look, there's a lot about Instagram or TikTok or YouTube Shorts or just YouTube in general, in addition to Spotify and Apple, that helps you paint a picture of your show. And to gather that information, to gather that data in one place. I don't know, when I first I probably heard you guys maybe 8 months ago.
I believe so.
Something like that. And I was like, finally? It took this long for someone to build that. Like, it's crazy. So thank you.
You're very welcome. I appreciate you, not only being a power user, but giving us great feedback here in the team.
Yeah.
Really
I mean,
cool.
you guys are solving like one of the foundational problems in the industry.
I appreciate it.
It's like, it's pretty crazy. Cause like everyone who I talk to, especially like people who are interested in advertising on podcasts, like the thing that holds them back is the analytics.
Yeah.
It's a lack of knowing.
Yeah, lack of knowing, or just like being like, all right, what does a download mean?
Yeah. No.
And I think too, and this is like the hot take, there's so many ways where people can manipulate downloads out there that I think advertisers are like, can be left holding the bag. But there's this element, and this is how I see it. It's like if you can't look at a podcast and you can just see and feel the culture of the listener base, like when you look at a show like All In or My First Million, like you can tell from word of mouth interactions, from understanding their audience, like, oh, whether it's 100 listeners or 100,000 listeners, like they have an audience and people that really care about what they're doing. And we tell advertisers that we work with, like that's a huge signal from the get-go. It's like before you even look at downloads, like is there an emerging listener base? Can you find the culture on social and comments and shares? Like there's a lot of signals that before you get a report from a podcast that you and your internal team as a company, if you're looking to advertise, we think you should be kind of doing your own diligence outside of just looking at the downloads, but looking at their brand across platforms.
Sure.
Which we could dive in really deep there.
Too. Talk about Overlap. What are you building?
Yeah, so Overlap is an AI agent that will be your short form video editor for you. So we work with big podcast publishers like iHeart Media down to like small creators who really experience the major bottleneck of promoting your show and reaching your audience, which is like short form video editing, which is like very time intensive, requires kind of like counterintuitive approach to distribution. And what we allow you to do on our platform is build an agent that will understand your tastes, understand the moments you're looking for, write copy in the way that you want to, and then put, edit clips right when you're done with your show, and then post it and schedule those out to any platform that you want. And so, we work with a lot of podcasters. We also work with a lot of YouTubers. We work with increasingly TV, studios. Like anyone who's producing long form content is a potential, they have this need of wanting to get high quality short form video out at a really high cadence, which is how you win across social. And that's social is where people are spending their time.
Yeah. I'll selfishly share what I'm building. And then with that, I'll share why you two each built the two most important pieces of tech in our entire stack.
So good.
So I founded Thursday Labs about 3 years ago, podcast network. We've always been very much focused on the like tech, Silicon Valley startup, VC ecosystem, because that's just always been my world. Started an agency for startups when I was 18 and then built some startups and then was in venture for a long time. And now I'm here. So I've always liked that tech media overlap. And my philosophy coming into this, I'll back up a little bit. I started a show when I was the CMO of a company called Day One, right before Thursday Labs. And Gary Vee was one of our investors. We had some other big funds involved. And this was like tail end of COVID. ChatGPT had not hit the market yet. I don't even know if it had really been invented yet, but if it had been, it was like no one had heard of it. So there was no AI. And we were very much following Gary Vee's playbook, which was like record a 1 hour conversation and then turn that into a zillion pieces of shorter form pieces of content, like an 20 Instagram reels from one full length episode, a blog post, a newsletter, a bunch of tweet threads, a bunch of TikToks, like make your content travel. And we were doing this manually. And sure, it helped that we had Gary on the show, but like this podcast strategy, it immediately blew up for us.
Wow.
Launched a podcast, and within 90 days, we had like grown the company by 300% just from these clips that we were putting out. And Instagram Reels had just started. TikTok was like very new still. It was all manual. And I realized, whoa, like this podcasting thing in tech is starting to become bigger than it has been. Everyone wants a podcast now. But everyone's missing the mark. Everyone still is measuring it on like how successful is it on Spotify and Apple, like how many listeners are tuning into this thing every week and listening to the 45-minute audio episode on their commute. Problem was no one was commuting anymore. COVID.
Yeah.
People are like either watching on their smart TV when they're cooking a dinner at home for their family or listening on the go when they're on a walk sometimes, but mostly just tuning into the clips. And I'd be like, wait a second, one of our full-length episodes just got 35 listens on YouTube, but the 10 clips that we pulled from it got 8 million views on Instagram in the same week.
Yeah.
And so I go to a brand and I'd be like, hey, do you want to sponsor this thing? Like we're getting a lot of traction and a lot of engagement on Instagram. It's brand new. Like the rates are going to be cheap right now. And they're like, well, how many monthly downloads do you have? And I'm like, well, who cares about that?
Yeah.
Like 10 million in a month. That's like unheard of numbers for a creator, an influencer on Instagram alone, let alone TikTok. The algorithm works so well for this now. But you just care about the mid-roll ad we're going to put in our Spotify episode. So anyway, started going out and just like preaching this to the world of founders, and a lot of them were like, I get it. I want to win the short form game. Like I see that as where we're going. So now we've done about almost 70 shows now.
Wow.
Largely for B2B tech companies, a few corporates. A third of our portfolio is VCs. I have launched my own show as well I did it a little over a year ago. So we've seen a lot. And since then, there was a time where we were gathering data on every single short form clip that we were posting every day on all of our shows on each platform manually. We'd have someone log into Instagram, be like, how many views did this get this week? And then next week we're going to do it again because these don't just last one day. And we do it on TikTok and we do it on LinkedIn. And we'd have to sit down with our clients every month and be like, these are the numbers we got in the last month. But even if you ask me tomorrow, it's going to be different.
Yeah.
It was so outrageously cumbersome until a listener came out and was finally just like, here are your numbers on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, Apple in one place. And I could finally just be like, oh, this is how our show is actually doing. Because the show is so much more than just Spotify and Apple now. The show lives on Instagram and lives on TikTok. That is the main real estate. With you guys. So you launched this incredible tool where I could just plug in a Google Drive link to a full episode and it'll automatically cut like a zillion. Like we're literally, one of my episodes, it cut 120 clips.
Jeez. Which
in
speaks
like,
to the quality of the episode.
Oh my God.
That was,
so some episodes don't get 120.
Yes, I think our lowest is like 15. Like that's like a
How long
episode.
was that episode?
Hour and a half.
Wow.
Like,
That's
it was, if you do the math, every minute was a clippable moment.
Wow.
Shout out to Adam Greenfeld, former founder of Thesis. Now he's at Element.
If
everyone needs the best guest you've ever had, Adam Greenfeld he's up there.
I love that.
So that episode yielded I think it was like 119 clips. And okay, cool. By the way, it's not just here are your clips. It also posts them all automatically for you to the feeds that you want with captions. So I experimented with this thinking like, okay, like another clipping platform, they all suck. Like I always give them a try because you never know.
Yeah.
Because I'm kind of waiting for the day that one of them actually does something good. So I was like, let's give it a try on my show. Like I'll set up a burner account. Like what's the worst that happens? My show is the one that we take risks on and the canvas. I think it was a month, 7 million views.
Wow.
And we grew from like
That is
0 to
insane.
5,000 followers on that account in like 6 weeks. And then at the end of
insane.
3 months, it was like 10,000 followers that were like really engaged. And so then it was like, oh my God,
That's so good.
this is teaching us a lot about the power of short form. And so like, that was only the burner account. Then the main account too also grew by like 25% on Instagram alone. So, okay, both of you guys built some really powerful stuff.
Yeah. And also more backstory on that is that I think we had a mutual friend try to connect us. This was maybe a couple months before we started working together.
Oh, I don't remember this.
Yeah, this was Will Hagen, actually. But, this is someone who I think you were talking to about like potentially working with.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, you got to connect with Jake. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like connect us. And then you were like, I think he reached out to you and you were like, it's clipping, AI clipping. I'm out.
You know what it was? It was Opus Clip.
Yeah, totally.
Like they just suck. I'm just going to shout it out. Like Opus Clip somehow owned the space and everything every time I would try it, the content would be awful.
Yeah. And they were first movers in a way that I think hurt us and helped us in a certain way. And that like, I think they, and smart people there, whatever, like they were just ahead of where the tech could be. And they burned a lot of bridges with people who take content really seriously. And, which helped us in that like, we are able to kind of contrast with them in a way where like, hey, it's not just about like quantity, it's also about quality. Like you have to get it in a place where like, if you hired a person to do this, you wouldn't fire them. Which is like a lot of these clipping tools are like that. Yeah. But then also it's like, people are open to the idea. Like it kind of was a gateway a little bit into folks. But then I think someone else connected us like later down the road.
Yeah.
And then
it was the Play Kit team.
Yes,
of them.
exactly. And then, and I have calls like this all the time with folks who are like very skeptical. Yeah. And you were kind of one of those calls where it's like, I'll try it.
Yeah.
Like we'll see. And like often the kind of eureka moment for people is if we can get them to a point where they link an account and like, flood it is probably too strong of a word, but it's like, hey, set a high posting cadence.
Yeah.
Create this agent, think about the prompts in a deliberate, thoughtful way, both from like the copywriting to the clip selection process, and then like let it go. And like see what happens. And like when people get to that point, it's always magic.
That's amazing.
Well, let's talk about the business. Let's dive right in.
Yeah.
I prepared a few statistics for us. This is the Thursday Labs, listener.com overlap AI sponsored statistics segment. So there's some really interesting hard data here. I'm just going to read this off because I can't remember numbers at all, let alone these numbers off the top of my head. All right. When we look at podcasts right now, these days, host-read ads command over 62% of podcast ad revenue. It's interesting. 60-second spots run usually at $25 to $28 CPM, whereas programmatic ads are at $5 to $15 CPM. So like that somewhat sets the tone for just like where is advertising dollars in this space right now. Okay. Host-read ads outperform producer-read ads by 31% in purchase rate. To put that in plain English, like people trust and buy from podcast hosts more than they do like influencers who just do like an unboxing video or like a day in the life video or whatever. Interesting. Kind of makes sense. It's like the person you like, you really like listen to them for a long time. You spend time with them. They're literally in your ear all the time. Okay. See where we're going with this. 81% of podcast listeners trust host recommendations, and host-read ads drive 71% of brand recall. I also want to caveat with the whole like host-read ads. There are a lot of really bad host-read ads. We've all like listened to a podcast that's like, quick break to listen to this ad from our sponsor. And everyone's like, just skip the 15 seconds to get past it.
And sometimes you can tell the host is like,
they were just paid to do it.
The producer is like, you got to sit down and read this right now.
But then we've also heard the ones that are really good. So like, I didn't even
one
realize
that stuck out to me recently, and it was like, it could be one that I skipped, but the way they did it was Rick Rubin's show. And it's like a very old school branded show. And it sounded like you were dialing in when the ad came on, like an old school radio where the signals were kind of staticky and then you got on the right signal. And I'm like, wow, like, I probably would have skipped this in any other show, but I think that's the creative element of like why some do good or don't. Even if they feel like, hey, I might skip it. If there's a creative element to it, it's like, oh, this is actually cool and I want to hear from it.
Totally. And for what it's worth, I'm not trying to push this in the direction of like, hey, brands, you should be sponsoring podcasts. This is going in the direction of like, brands, you need to completely rethink how you sponsor podcasts. So let's keep going. A few more numbers. This one's crazy. 62% of podcast fans trust ads read by their favorite host compared to only 15% who trust social media influencers. It's another take on like people trust hosts over influencers. Podcast advertising delivers 86% ad recall among the most active podcast users, the highest across any media platform tested, ahead of social, YouTube, and traditional broadcast. Really important to come back to this some point today for B2B, because literally trust is the entire game there, way more than anything else. Last one is podcast ad conversion rate to website visits average 1.32%. versus 0.9% click-through rate for Facebook and Instagram ads. So just setting the tone for like what's going on here. But I think most importantly, there are two companies that we need to kick off our conversation with. TBPN, Formula One. Casey, when I say TBPN and Formula One right now in May of 2026, like what the hell is happening here in your head?
I mean, all the key points you brought up, I'm so glad you did, because I think it opens up the broader conversation around not only my perspective, but I think of what a lot of people may kind of think out there, which is, podcasting, at least when I got into it, just for the reference and the context, I started my show in 2017 as a young 17-year-old kid in high school with no idea what this industry would turn into. And for me, I started it as a mechanism for connecting with founders, interviewing them, and just, again, for the reference, up until this point, I've had over 500 founders on my show, from founders of Netflix to Elon Musk's mom and sister, just a wide array of different people. And throughout that time, and again, I want the people that are listening to know my perspective here. I rarely did any type of core programmatic advertising. I did a lot of host-read stuff, but more so like branded partnerships that extended beyond the mic. And I think it speaks to not only what TBPN did so well, but how I remember Jordy in an article talked about how TBPN was not a podcast. We could all sit here today and you could label it as a podcast. Could you list it on podcast apps? Yes, but they built one of the most like cutting edge media companies built for the tech industry that is this ESPN-esque of tech, which is not easy to replicate. And given their background in tech, they were the right people and they had an unfair advantage there.
Yeah.
But one thing you talked about of the Formula One F1 model was, for them, they didn't just do partnerships. They said, hey, we have this vehicle of TBPN and we're only going to work with brands that want to associate with us for the long term. You're going to be in all the clips, you're going to be in all the stuff. And by no means was it a traditional CPM based or partnership. It was a much more like, hey, brand, large brand, big budget most of the time, of course. If you want to associate with our brand, like this is what it's going to take.
Yeah.
And it's get in there or get out. And
What
again,
were
I
the
don't want to speak
examples?
for them, but I think most shows, and before I give back to you, is even for my show, to take a smaller example, like I worked with Adobe and Slack many years ago, and we would do this like 3 or 6 month campaign, but it was very creative in the deal sense. It was like, yes, we did 4 to 8 host read ads that came with like 3 clips per episode. But one thing that I thought was really cool was, and this was my pitch to them, which was, hey, my show is all about interviewing founders. You guys obviously are looking to talk with founders. Let's do this sort of live format where I interview small business owners, and Small Business Saturday was coming up. So we ended up doing this live stream on Slack's LinkedIn channel, which has like a million and a half, executives that are following it. They run a bunch of paid ads to it. And we ended up having like 200,000 live concurrent viewers over this like 2-hour interview series where I'm interviewing young, small business owners. And I was this podcast host talent, which I think as the podcaster in their eyes, it's up to you to kind of bring these creative ideas to give them an example. And, good brands will take a bet, just like a lot of those brands really on TBPM were like, hey, sure, we'll have our logo floating at the bottom and we'll pay you a crazy amount, but we believe in you. And that's who I think you need to find as an emerging show is like brands that you believe in, that believe in you, and that you can actually build partnerships with long term.
What were some examples of ways you were essentially pushing the brand, like representing the brands that were paying you in addition to a mid-roll ad?
You're saying for my show specifically?
That and like what you've also seen as really exciting plays.
I'll speak to like what we see a lot of listeners. Like we work with a lot of the biggest podcast publishers in the world. And I know one that we want to talk about that I love referencing, and they love that I bring this up, is a company called John Boy Media, which you guys should work with them if you don't already, I'm sure.
I don't think we do. So
I'll put you guys in touch because they're like the epitome of fully embracing, like they're sort of a Barstool Sports of baseball podcast network, nearly 40 shows. And I know we'll get into this, but they were a media company that ended up launching podcasts that fit their narrative well versus being, hosts that want to come in and just sort of podcast and figure out social. And for them, we see a lot of the deals they do because they track most of their campaigns on our product. And they're just so creative with their deal making when it comes to host-read sponsorships, YouTube integration, all of the clips. And I think, from things placing the logos on the short form clips, you might think it's like a small thing, but they can say, hey, we can see 100 clips that have the X brand logo on there. And we've gotten 50 million impressions last year. And like brands who are looking to sponsor for, again, not always, but more of the awareness, top of funnel campaigns, big sports media brands, that's important to them. And I think for my show specifically, I think I've always looked at my show as this sort of business development vehicle where at its core, it was never about building the biggest show, working with the biggest brands. I did when it made sense in terms of working with brands. But for me as a founder, also a podcaster myself, over the years, like my last company, we had 37 angel investors when we raised money for it. And pretty much all the investors were past guests on my podcast. And outside of that, I would do a handful of like smaller to midterm type of deals I would interview founders, build a relationship. Their company would be, oh yeah, we're testing with podcast advertising. And they were already in my ecosystem. And I think that's super important for emerging media brands to independent shows. Like what brands are you using? Do you have relationships with? In my case, can I interview? And how can I get my current sort of ecosystem involved already versus cold pitching 100 brands that are, allocating budget across the biggest shows in the world. Like you have to find in my opinion, for the small shows, for the big companies, like the ones that align so closely with you. And it's up to you to sort of give them the creative ideas at this stage in the market.
Yeah. I mean, we're working a bunch of shows in our portfolio. Now we're going out to brands and being like, all right, let's try something. Like take this show, that show, or that show. Each are getting roughly like 3 to 6 million impressions a month on Instagram. Follower count's growing. They're new. They've been around for like 4 months. So we're not even episode 20 yet. To have that many impressions on a new show, you're going to get a premium on that.
Yeah.
We're going to do the mid-roll ad. Sure. But also, here's what we're going to do. The hosts are going to wear your hat on the podcast. They're going to drink out of a mug on every episode with your logo on it. Interview your CEO on a deep dive 2-hour episode once a quarter.
Yep.
We'll film it in your office, right?
Yeah.
We'll work you naturally into the conversation on every other episode. We'll obviously put your logo on all of our short form clips, thousands of clips over the course of, let's say, the next 3 to 6 months. We'll put you in our Instagram stories. We'll do like very behind the scenes, like really authentic, raw Instagram story type clips once a week for 3 months about your brand or your product. We'll do that on the podcast page and the host's personal account, which, by the way, their personal page, because they're a kind of thought leader influencer themselves, they already have 50K followers themselves. So like, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of other things you can do. Oh, they'll comment on your videos on LinkedIn for you. Like now we're just treating podcast hosts as influencers, regular creators.
Yeah. And on the TBPN point, like I think what Jordy and John were, in addition to podcasters and kind of live streamers, is like they're also tech influencers. Like they're on X all day, like, you know, in the replies and chopping it up with people, doing funny posts like that. If you're in the tech world, like those like hit hard and are funny and like are very kind of insidery. But like that show, and there's obviously like a lot of other like, you know, VC firms and like other folks trying to do like the TBPN of X. But
monitoring the situation.
And like, you know, they're great, but like you need to have influencers like Jordy and John who can like transcend just the live stream. And obviously that's a big part of it, and you want to have that be clips, but like they're funny, you know, like, you know, even for their non-tech related segments, like they're funny. And so like, how can you know, be that and be a broader influencer beyond just the actual content on the show?
And I think too, like, I think there's, especially for interview shows, there's always this dynamic of, do people care about the hosts or are they coming for the guests? And I think for me in the early days, that was what I struggled with, of like, I was interviewing a lot of great guests, but I didn't have any experience or things to share outside of like being a curious interviewer. And I think for Jordy and TBPN as a concept, like they've built companies, they've sold companies, they've worked in venture capital. Like they were the talent that you come for. And obviously they had so many, like all the top CEOs as guests very frequently, which was a huge unfair advantage for them. But people cared about them just chopping it up and jamming. And I think you need to think about that when it comes to how you're going about your show. And one thing that I think TBPN did very well, which kind of how we think about our product, and something that we put out last year, which you're familiar with, which is this, what we call episode clusters, where I think, in a listener aside, but just like a podcast is a thesis, we believe that like not only modern podcasts, but the modern episode is so unfairly managed in the sense of people care about downloads, yes, but the way we view this sort of graph sense that we built on listener is you have like your anchor content, the long form YouTube, the long form X, long form on, you know, Apple, Spotify, but all of the other pieces of content, that could mean newsletter, that could mean live event activations. Like there's so many other aspects that make an episode, specifically newsletter, short form, and obviously the long form, that really make this ecosystem of an episode. And I think that's where, like, how do you show up across all of that? And I think, you know, one thing that we always incentivize customers and people we work with to do is, if people are maybe just sponsoring the long form, but you're posting on the short form that gets 8 million views, we think our tool can help say, hey, you only sponsored X, but you missed out on 8 million impressions the last 90 days. And I think that's so much core to our DNA, is like being able to showcase more easily and represent the missed opportunity with advertisers and to use it as a sales tool. So that's super important. I think not only for customers that we work with like yourself, but for teams out there that are trying to think, how do I better represent what's going on across my entire ecosystem?
I found this quote the other day, I'll paraphrase from Jordy from TBPN, about the Formula One philosophy. For anyone who doesn't know Formula One, you know, race cars, and they're like a massive business now. So in his own words, I pitched every advertiser that we were basically building like a kind of Formula One team. Every deal is annualized. Every sponsor is in every episode and every clip. These are year-long category exclusive deals. And we sold out 2026 ad inventory with this model before OpenAI deal even closed. And then OpenAI bought them for what we think is around $200 million. So sponsors buy ecosystem presence, not impressions. I think that's like, I'll actually repeat that because that's really powerful. Sponsors are buying ecosystem presence, not just the impressions. Impressions are great.
Yeah.
But like for this whole thing, this creator's lifestyle and the journey of building it and all the guests that come on, like it's presented by this brand or this portfolio of brands. They sold merch with sponsor logos. Like it's so funny seeing these guys on air talking about, what the fuck they're talking about that day, wearing those like green Formula One jackets with like lamp and like basically Pied Piper logo on it. Like it was just funny to all of us. We were like, fucking love Ramp. Like Ramp did that. And like, I'm going to go with Ramp now because I love these guys. Like it just made a lot of sense.
Totally.
They sold merch. They packaged business announcements like trading cards. Obviously the visual identity was like deliberately just like what Formula One did. And it totally worked. And they sold it in what, like a year? Year and a half?
Yeah, I think it was like a year and a half.
So of course, the TBPN case study, it's an amazing case study. Will go down in history. But why was no one talking about the Formula One element over the last month? That's what bothered me. It was like, cool, OpenAI bought this like podcast, $200-ish million, hundreds of millions of dollars, but like, why were we missing from the conversation the business ecosystem of how they even got the show to that point to be able to be sold?
Totally. Like we should have been talking about them. Like we're probably talking about them partially right now because of the OpenAI deal, but like they were, exactly what you're saying. They were a success story before that. And like, how old was the show? A year and a half or so? Like
less than 18 months.
Less than 18 months. I mean, part of it is that they are serving a niche that like facilitates that, like where like, they are getting VCs and founders and everyone in the tech world, like seeing their content, like the high awareness with like the right group of people who are very valuable to like certain brands who will pay them a lot. But they're also just like, there's so many tech podcasts that are not fun. And they're like the most, and they're like having fun, embracing it in a way that is like very exciting. The other thing that like I always think about with them is like they did the always on approach. Like if you go onto X and you're in, tech X or tech Twitter, ecosystem, like, and your algorithm is tuned to that, you will see their content because they are posting every hour and they are injecting their content into every conversation related to tech. And if you don't have that approach to the timeline, and they always talk about the timeline, like you have to, you're kind of silent and you're not visible. And they leaned into that really hard and kind of embraced it with an enthusiasm that very few tech podcasters have.
Well, let's talk about volume then, because I think we're all very bullish on like the volume.
For sure.
And you see that you probably have the best data of anyone in the world on like what actually is happening when you go high volume. You're probably also in that passenger seat of that too, or vice versa. I'm curious. How do you respond when people say to you like, I feel like if I'm posting that much, I'm going to be bothering people?
Yeah, you probably have a better perspective on this.
Well, I think there's a couple things of volume. One is that like, we always have to be careful when it's volume. It's like, obviously, like if your content isn't good or if the clips are very bad, like volume is not going to get you very far. But the people who say like, oh, if I'm posting, more than once a day, like I'm going to be bothering people or spamming people, they don't quite understand how the algorithms work.
How do they work?
And they
absolutely,
and they work differently on all the platforms. But like at the end of the day, like they are, and you had a great analogy earlier today around like the platforms are big LLMs, but like they're smart and recommending your content to the right people when those people want to see them. So like if you have a big fan who's opening up Instagram 10 times a day, they might want to see your content 10 times a day. And if you don't post 10 times a day, you are not serving that fan or, viewer sufficiently. Some people, maybe don't have enough content to post 10 times a day. But there's no really downside to posting a lot. Because if someone doesn't really want to see your content, they just won't see your content.
Yeah.
And also like you think that people, and you kind of think about your own experience, like scrolling through the algorithm, like you just swipe on through. Like there's literally no cost. It's not like someone sees it in their feed and they're like, this is bothering.
I've seen you too much.
Yeah, this is bothering me. If they see you too much, honestly, what they think is like, wow, I should be paying closer attention to them. Like, why are they they're everywhere these days. And so there's that mindset. And obviously you don't want to do that to the extent where like you're putting out really bad stuff.
Yeah.
But it is like a huge dimension of like how people build awareness, build a brand, build an audience. And it's very different by platforms, I mean, well, I think we talk about it a lot where it's like Instagram, like you should be, if your goal is like build awareness and build an audience, like you can really, the cap on Instagram is 50 times a day. You can post up to 50 reels a day right now.
Which is basically unlimited.
Basically, unlimited.
That's twice an
That's
hour.
a lot.
Like, that's crazy.
That's insane. Totally. And yeah, very few people do that. But like, if you're starting a new account and you have a huge content library, like you should try that and watch what happens.
Yeah.
And what will happen is your account will grow really, really fast and you'll be like seemingly everywhere. And it's like a huge hack.
I look at that for I'll bring in the LLM. It's not even an analogy. Like this is true. Think of Meta or Instagram as, and by the way, Instagram these days is the most important algorithm. It's the best algorithm for reaching new audiences, finding your people, building a thing and growing. TikTok, pretty close, but like, I just think Instagram's just a little better. LinkedIn for video, trash. Good for text and photos. Twitter, so its own world. And then YouTube's like, it's a completely different conversation. You have to dominate Instagram. I don't give a shit like what space you're in if your audience isn't on Instagram. Like even just try it because humans go to bed at night scrolling Instagram, or they like are waiting in line at Starbucks scrolling Instagram. Like almost everyone's there. Yeah. Anyway, it is a massive LLM. Instagram is a massive LLM because it is now. Yeah. And if you think about your Claude or your Chat GPT, the more data you give it, the more information you give it about you and just everything, the better it is. It gives you back. The more you give it, the better output it gives you. So, okay, the more volume, the more data you give to the Meta LLM here, aka the more you post on Instagram, the more data you're telling it around like, this is who I am. This is what I talk about. These are who my guests are. This is who I'm trying to reach. This is my message. This is everything about me. You're giving it a lot more information to then give you better results. And so one, of course, that's great for growth. Like, I think my take on what's happening, and after talking to engineers about it, after what has happened for us when we were like posting literally like 40 clips a day.
Yeah.
I mean, hundreds of clips a week. And these accounts would go from, in month one, like 0 to like 500,000 impressions. Okay. Month two, 500,000 impressions to 5 million impressions. I was like, I've never seen, and this just happened on 3 shows at the same time. Like I've never seen success like that.
Yeah.
What's happening here? And it's like, okay, a new account. You kind of warm it up. You post 1 clip per episode per day over the first month. And Instagram's like, oh, whoa. Okay, well, maybe each clip only got 500 views. But if you posted 1,000 clips that month, that means your account got 500,000 views, 500,000 impressions. And then Instagram's going to think, oh, cool. This guy's new. 500,000 impressions in the first month. They might be onto something. Let's feed them to their people. They want you to succeed because they're going to, they want you to do well.
Yeah. They want to find your audience for you.
So then they're like, okay, let's give them a better shot next month. And now they are hyper targeting even more. And it just keeps growing and growing. So when people come to me and they're like, oh, I want to do like a monthly podcast or like a bi-weekly show. Like, it's too much. I'm just like, it's like saying I'm going to run a marathon, my first marathon, but I'm just going to train 1 day a week. Like you might as well just not. You're not going to get there.
It's so interesting. I think to go off both your guys' points, like we're in this space where there is a lot of polarity though, where it's like you can see the Alex Hormozi is putting out 500 pieces of content a week, and then you can see the acquired podcast that does 8 pieces of long form content a year, which of course lives with a lot of short form content. And I think there's this element of like, we're in this pendulum effect where it's like, you can't be in the middle where like, there's no exclusive content, or there's not like, for acquired guys, like, less is more for them. The quality is there, and they've built the audience to do that. But in terms of getting the message out there, like you need to be everywhere. And I think I saw this clip a while back from like Alex Hormozi, where he was talking to someone. They're putting out 5 clips a week, and he's like, "I'm doing 500. Like, you just need to increase your output." It's like shots on net, right? You got to see what sticks. And I think I'll speak to the more new content that Hormozi's putting out, where he's like having his live conferences. People will stand up and ask him a question, and I commented on one of them like, "Dude, I'm loving this new content format." And the comment got like 1,000 likes, and I could tell like now he's posting 100 of those pieces of clips a week, and like people obviously resonate with it, and he felt that kind of like, oh wow, people like this versus me talking to the camera as much. And I think that's what platforms like Overlap and just the output allows you to recognize is like what's working, what's not, how are we testing more. But I think there is, and I think that's where exclusive and less is more content is also very alive and well in this ecosystem of people like Acquired, people that do, one big event a year, or even someone like my friend James DeMolin from the School of Hard Knocks, where he's, going up and interviewing people on their main account that has like 8.5 million followers. He is so scientific with it, where if you look back, like you will not find a clip that has less than 1 million views over the last 2.5 years. And for them on their main account, like they rather post 10 clips this month that do 1 million to 5 million views each. And I like to point to those examples as well, because I think in order to get there, you need to, of course, test. But once you find something that works, there is value in saying, how are we the best in the world at what we do? And how do we create less of it, but more high quality? And that's where I think Acquired on the podcast side does it. And then James on the short form content side has like really nailed it. Yeah. But it all comes down to the format approach, where there's no one size fits all, and you need to figure that out if that exists in your world as a potential.
Yeah. And that's also a good point of like, there's no reason you should just have one account doing this. Like you could have a main, and often a lot of our customers like have a main account that like a human editor is still like very fine, like polishing, doing animations and doing things that AI is not quite capable of doing with the same level of taste that a human editor. Have that on a main account. Maybe post one a day, maybe like 2 or 3 a week, but then have a second one that is like, listener clips or whatever. And it's just like a constant, always on, like, maybe not 2 an hour, but maybe like 10 a day. And then, and you can even have multiple of those that are focused on each sub niche or topic that you talk about, especially if you have a big library of content. You can really expand that out. And that's where you get the ROI. And that also is like feeds into not only awareness and promotion, but also into like how you approach the like really kind of, handcrafted clips in a better way.
I also love the feedback loop and the learning you can get. I mean, we have a hard rule in our network of like any new show, we just don't look at the numbers until day 60.
I love that.
Like, of course, we're kind of monitoring and paying attention, but like, and we'll meet weekly and like really do a deep dive, but like we can't make any decisions on how to shift things, if we're going to change the guest strategy, or like if we need to change up the type of questions we ask. We can't make real decisions until we've actually had a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 shots on net with our short form. And like if you're putting out that many clips, and you will see patterns. Oh wow, like every time we open with like, a sad person crying, like that does way better than every time it's just like some dude being opinionated, whatever. Or like every time we open tight on someone's face versus far away, it's a better hook. Or like, okay, every time we like interview an old white dude, like it flops. That tells you a lot of where to go next. But if you're only posting once a day or once a week, or doing like a full episode every now and then, there's no way you have enough data to make real decisions. And I think people find themselves like chasing this moving target over the course of a few months or a year. They never really, they're making new decisions. Oh, I should like stop interviewing these types of people, or I should do that. And then they never find success with it. And then they quit before episode 20, which is why 99% of podcasters quit by episode 20. There's a lot of reasons to do that, but like that's a true statement.
Absolutely.
And I think it's largely just because you didn't have enough data. It's kind of like investing $20 into the stock market. And after like 6 months of trying to day trade it, you're like, oh, I'm not a millionaire yet. It's like, well, you did nothing to start with, really.
Totally. And I mean, the thing also like that you probably see a lot is that people think they know. Like they think they know what's good and what's bad, but they don't really know.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really hard. I mean, it's like, especially folks who don't spend a lot of time on social are like, oh, I want things to look this way, or I want these type of moments. It's like, that's not necessarily what's gonna crush,
Yeah.
and like build a big audience. And so like having them see that often in action, where it's like, hey, when you talked about this, or like when your guests focused on this topic, that clip did 100,000, and then all the other clips do 1,000, So that's something that is just always super revealing to folks, and leaves them open to kind of learning and testing more.
I have a question for you, Casey. So on the topic of like either go mega volume or not mega volume, nothing really in the middle. You used Acquired as an example. These guys have been around for a long time. I mean, they were pioneers of like podcasting in general. One of the first podcasts I've ever listened to, and I was a kid. So I feel like they've earned the right.
Totally.
If it's May of 2026 and you're like, you're a founder, or you're an athlete, or you're a creator, and you're busy as hell, and you want to launch a new podcast, you basically don't have an audience though to your name and your personal brand. And you were thinking, oh, I don't have a lot of time to dedicate to like filming, research and prep, editing, distribution, all that, aside from bringing on a network like us to do it all for you. But you were curious about going to like, I want to do very little. Everything I touch turns to gold. Less is more. How would you position it, if at all?
Yeah. I think there is an element of like, you have to earn your right to do that. But I also think the alternative, which I love this quote from Charlie Munger, he would say, take a simple idea and take it serious. And David Senra talks about this a lot from Founders, where I love his new show, David Senra, by David Senra, I think it's called. But Founders, like he earned his shots on net of like doing the prep work, doing the deep dives into the history of entrepreneurs. But I was listening to his podcast yesterday with Dana White. And if you look at his new slate of guests for the new show, it's Dana White, founder of AppLovin, Evan Spiegel from Snapchat, just iconic founders. And that's what it is. And he's obviously, he's earned that right to do it. But for him in that show, I know every time I turn it on, it's going to be just a top tier episode. And that is kind of, in my opinion, that thesis, even though it's a weekly, it's just the quality that's coming from that show. I love as someone that is, likes all the clips, but I just know that, hey, it's kind of added to my Rolodex of, that's one that if I'm going on a run, like I can listen to that and not even think about the guests and click play. And I think if you're starting a show, it's how do you kind of go back to the table of like, what did Founders do? He took a simple idea and took it seriously, right? He's reading books, he's dissecting it. You could read a book and give your spark notes on X, but David has that energy and passion where I hear people talk a lot about, I think there's opportunities where, we talk about TBPN and the other examples out there. Founders as a product, where it's David being obsessed with Founders, I think there's elements of that can be replicated. And you see that with, I think there's a history podcast, I'm forgetting the name of it, but it's just, whether it's a guest show or a solo show, doing that prep work, right? It's like, if you don't have time, it probably isn't going to be something that you can take seriously. But for me, and I go back to the scrappiness, because that's where my personal experience is, where I was in high school with my show, much different space with my podcast, didn't overthink audio, video. I started doing Facebook live streams, which was my podcast for the first 50 episodes. And I had a, $100 Blue Yeti mic, and, I'd go live on Facebook, and like my aunt would pop in, but I didn't want her to see it. I was just like, I didn't know any other platform to use, and I would download the audio and upload it. And for me, I got my shots on net. And for me, I set out these ambitious goals of I wanted to do 60 interviews in 100 days, because I ended up getting this meeting with Gary Vee during like my junior year of high school. I go up to New York on a Friday, I missed school. And I remember like I didn't have anything to talk about with him in terms of like past successes. So I was like, I want to try to get my reps in and then go to him, share what I'm doing and get feedback. And I just became obsessive, and I was interviewing anyone and everyone that I could meet on social. And a lot of those early guests became good friends, my former co-founder, my last startup. And I think for me, and again, this is coming from the 17-year-old perspective of myself, by episode 150, like I felt like episode 151 was really my first episode of like, wow, I've learned what not to do, from the conversations to my curiosity to my format, what works for me. And I put so much to not caring if I had any listeners, if any opportunity come from it, but by doing the reps, it opened up so many doors where I remember, and just for the audience, for the context, by 2 years into my podcast, I had the opportunity to sit down with Larry King. I was 19 years old, he was 87, and I remember that was such a like a pinnacle moment in my life, especially for the podcast that just opened up many doors from there. And I remember asking Larry King, he's someone that did 60,000 interviews. He was 87, starting a new podcast in 2019 called The Millionth Question. And I asked him, like, Larry, Mr. King, you're 87 years old. You've had 2 strokes. Like, why are you starting new projects, a podcast specifically? And, I don't want to misquote him, but he's like, man, I love it. Like, this is what I was born to do. I've been sitting across the table from people like you since I was 17, 19 myself, and asking questions and having conversations is what I'm built for. And, he just talked about this idea of like taking a simple idea of asking questions and taking it serious. And I think, you can point to many quotes around how you should think about it, but I think the scrappiness back then when I started, and maybe when we all started our journeys, was so important. Nowadays, it's so competitive. You can't be as scrappy. You need to have a formula. And, with all the AI tools, it makes things so much easier. Companies like overlap in terms of the clipping volume. But I think you should get to a place where it's like, how do you build something that is less is more at the end of the day. Meaning, if there was the Olympics every weekend, people wouldn't care about it as much. It's because it's this big event that is so professional and people take it seriously that people care. Again, from athletes to podcasts like Acquired, there's always examples in that world. And I think that isn't the right formula for everyone, but you should be thinking about that, because exclusive access and like the less is more mentality, you see that across the board where it makes people care more in terms of the quality.
And the funny thing about Larry King is, like, he's been podcasting for 50, and he was podcasting for 50 years.
Yeah.
Like, his show on his CNN show, Larry King Live, that was just a podcast.
The mic in the middle.
Mic in the middle, guests,
Video.
set, video, just like, it was a video podcast. And it's interesting, David Senra, for, his new show, I've heard him talk about, like, how Charlie Rose was a big inspiration. Like, he's trying to do, like, Charlie Rose kind of for founders. But, like, Charlie Rose, on... it was just shown CBS, PBS. I don't know. It was one, on for many years. It was kind of like a set like this. It was like a dark set, like, and just darker than this. And then it was just him sitting across from someone and interviewing them. And it was a video podcast just on TV. And like, that is kind of that the medium, the audio medium is turning into that medium.
I think the word podcast is like, it's a packaging and understanding, right? Like a podcast in and of itself, it's funny. We all go to these mini events or talk to different podcast companies, and it's just an evolving term that I think everyone has their own different opinion on it, but it's just the packaging of the content is like what you expect from a podcast now is the audio and Apple, Spotify as destinations where you can listen when your eyes are busy, people like to say, but it's also the episodic long form video with the clips where you can kind of experience it in multiple formats. So,
and there are, like, the normal person probably consumes, like, there are 3 or 4 podcast shows that they're consuming in audio format at a given time on, like, a regular basis. For us, it's maybe 5 or 6, like, cause we're a little bit more like in it, but then there's probably 20 or 30 other shows that they're consuming via social media, via feeds.
Absolutely.
And, like, there are shows where I have consumed for many years, like maybe like Theo Vaughn is an example of this, where, like, I've never listened to a Theo Vaughn episode. I don't know if I could, but I, like, know when he has a new guest on. I like, sometimes I consume, like,
good example.
a lot of, like, each new episode via short form or maybe like via, like, YouTube mid form. But, like, I'm never gonna, like, in my commute in the morning, pop on Theo Vaughn.
It's a good point.
I remember one of our first shows at Thursday Labs, I was really close with the hosts, clients, and they came to me and they were like, dude, everyone just keeps coming up to me at events and parties and be like, I love your podcast. I love your podcast. I was like, yeah. I mean, that's great. That's one of our goals. And then when I launched my show, I felt the same thing. People were coming up to me all the time being like, dude, love your podcast. And I got curious and I started asking, like, great, thank you. What's your favorite part? What have you enjoyed lately? And everyone would just quote one of the most recent clips. I realized no one's actually listening to the pod. And the numbers reflect that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, you're fucking lying to me. But then I realized, no, that's okay. It's just a changing definition of, I love your podcast. I listen to your podcast. What they're really saying is like, I follow you on Instagram and I watch your clips all the time.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that works.
Yeah.
That works. Like, why do I need them to listen to me for 2 hours if
Yeah.
and it's going to be really hard for me to get them to, or it's going to be very easy for me to get them to listen for 30 seconds 200 times a week.
Yeah.
It kind of actually balances out at the end of the month, right?
And my question to you is, and I have a point on this, is like, how do you think about that as on your end as a podcaster, but also if you run into Theo Von at a bar and you said that to him, what's your viewpoint on like the value of that? And I'll kind of give an example that I think is relevant.
I think it's extremely valuable. I think that's just the name of the game now.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, I could just say to them like, hey, I follow you on Instagram and I love all your short form content, but that just feels a little weird.
Yeah.
And it's also a little bit of a like, I know you're putting in all this work to have a pod. I wanted to say like, I love your pod.
Yeah. No, there's so the example that I like is and it's close in our ecosystem, and one of our investors is a guy named Caleb Presley. You know Caleb?
Yeah.
He was at Barstool. He has a show called Sunday Conversations, where he sits down with all the big celebrities, and his show is long form on YouTube, but all of the brand deals and the sponsorships are like clip oriented. He'll be sitting down, in DJ Khaled's backyard, and he'll do a funny opening, and then he's like, "Do you mind if we take a break for White Claw to pop one out?" And like all of the show is sort of packaged into this 1 to 3 minute Instagram reel format.
Yeah.
But that is what his content and his show is built for. Like the long form is great, it crushes on YouTube, but and I think people could relate to that show, to Theo Von's, where it's like you could watch 10 of the clips and you're like, oh my God, Caleb, like love your show.
Yeah.
But I think that is so equally as valuable as someone that's watching, or listening to 1 or 2 episodes. Because I think when you're going to your podcast player, and you said this, I probably have like 3 to 5 that like I go to every time, that every now and then I might see a clip and then go listen to it if it's a brand new show. But that jump there's a commitment that you have to subscribe, you have to commit to it, you want to give it a shot.
It's super intimate too.
Yeah,
It's like I'm
yeah.
gonna have this person talk in my head, for an hour. Like it's a big commitment.
Yeah. And I think just to like weave a lot of the data that you spoke about earlier, like that's what makes, in my opinion, the podcast advertising and that uptick of trust so valuable. Because when you actually listen to someone, like, we've all interacted on social and on Slack many times, but to sit down with someone to have a conversation, like we'll spend more time here today having conversations in person, and that level of trust and respect and just in-person connection is what podcasting is I always like to say, like, you can expedite relationships from you and a guest to you and a listener when you're sitting with someone in their ears for an hour or 2 hours. And I think that's where that trust and the data kind of stems back from. And the clips are like the getting you interested to kind of jump into that trusting relationship in a sense.
Totally. Let's talk about the data as we'll start to kind of bring this to a close soon. What's wrong with the monthly download as the main metric for podcast success?
It's funny because we at Listener integrate with all leading hosting platforms, Megaphone, Simplecast, you name it, we integrate with it. And what we find is therefore the fragmentation is what we're trying to solve for. Is every platform works a little bit differently, what they define as a download versus a stream. But at its core, right, a download, and I believe you had this, in our past discussions, is it's just your device. If I subscribe to your show, it's your device downloading it. I might download 12 episodes from a podcast this month, but not listen to one of them. And, there's someone that I respect in the industry named John from Bumper. I was on a panel with him probably a year ago, and he was just like diving into that core point so deep of like, it's just your device is downloading it. It doesn't mean no one's listening. That's where Spotify streams, YouTube retention data. Like we love our YouTube integration because YouTube gives so much rich data of retention data, and that's what people care about. If you have a mid-roll ad, but you have 90% drop off in the first 4 minutes, it's like, you don't want to tell advertisers that, but we give you the opportunity to showcase like, hey, your retention was not there. And I think that's where what we've learned from integrating with all the platforms that view download streams a little bit differently is it's just one of those gray areas that I think the entire industry is aware of, but it's still so reliant on, so that you're in this sort of catch-22 position of like, if you could look at a show and look at the and last thought is on YouTube, you can look at a show that has 1,000 subscribers, and if it gets, 1,000 views an episode, you're like, nice, like that. You can see it; it's transparent. I think so much of podcasting historically doesn't have the public numbers, so there's this lack of transparency that I wonder. And I know Spotify tried it, where they said, "Hey, let's make streams public," and then they're like, "Ooh, we're actually going to do milestones, 50K listens, 100K
Yeah.
listens," but you can kind of see how the industry reacted to it. Of
Yeah.
they still care about it because I think there's a value in the gray area when people don't want the transparency to be out there. And I think that's just at its core what is happening a lot of the times.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just a cap to RSS feed. Like an industry built around RSS feed will just always be capped because it's just like the data is not right. It's not a good monthly downloads. It's not informative enough for advertisers ultimately to like really have the industry grow tremendously, which is why video has become such a big component of it. Not only because people's habits reflect that and like people want to watch, podcasts and see clips and all of that, but also just because like you get data that is like, you see how many people are watching where and when they're seeing advertising. And you could probably on YouTube, you can probably see like, how they interact with sponsors too from there.
Yeah. And I think it also goes back to one thing that I've always thought about with my show, but we do at Listener is like we want to give the publishers the power in their hand. Like that's what we went to market with on the product side is like this idea of a listener profile of how do you put your best foot forward as a show from the show level, but also the episode level where you could have 1,000 downloads a month, but you might be getting 8 million impressions on social, 1 million impressions on social. And we think hence why kind of what we're building at Listener is we think there's so much value where the publisher needs to be in control of how they are pitching and representing their show as this ecosystem and platform more than just the download. We like to say the phrase beyond the download. Like how do you capture episode analytics beyond the download? Because there is a beyond the download that is so relevant. And that's where I think there's the industry, and especially advertisers, and not to just make it about Listener, but since we've rolled out campaigns where we have over 8 figures of campaigns being tracked. Doesn't mean the brands are spending that on our platform, but the publishers we work with have over 8 figures of campaigns that they're managing, and they're utilizing our product to showcase the total campaign performance across omni-channel campaigns, audio, video on YouTube, and then short form content. And what we've learned from that is like the representation of, hey, yes, you care about downloads, but this is all the other stuff that is a part of the campaign. And this is how we want you to see it, is a level of like transparency that, again, keeps the power in the hand of the publisher because it matters how you represent it versus just seeing a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet where if the advertiser is asking it for specifics that cater to them, like you lose, like for example, and I'll pause after this, if TBPN was just on a spreadsheet, we get 5,000 streams per video, and this other podcast in the health world gets 10,000 downloads an episode. Those are not fair equations. Like the trust, the depth, the type of listener, like there's so much just hard to like pull together data points that go back to brand. And I think that's where podcasts are moving towards. Like, how are you building a brand in a community that supersedes the downloads and the metrics at its core?
Yeah. I found this interesting. I don't know if the word hack is the right word, but hack with a lowercase h, maybe. If I'm a host of a show or I run a network and I'm trying to now bring in some brand dollars to monetize the show, if you go to, let's say you've got a lot going on social, but very little going on Spotify, Apple, maybe even long form on YouTube. Okay. And we're in that position because our philosophy is like we're short form first. Like that's where I'm going to put almost all of our attention. So I go to a brand, and if I reach out to the like head of marketing or like a marketing director who they're in charge of podcast ad dollars, they have the budget, and that's like a quarterly budget, and it's pretty old school.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, we'd love to partner with you guys. Might that be interesting? Might you be interested in having a conversation? The first question they ask is, well, how many monthly downloads do you have? And my answer is, well, it's kind of low. Our focus is on social. We play the short form game. Their brain short circuits.
Yeah.
Or they're just like not interested. And I see this from a lot of big companies, medium companies, all the major networks, like I'm not going to name them, but like any of the ones that have been in and around Hollywood and New York City forever. who have podcast divisions, it's like they don't even care. And so I start digging in. I'm like, hey, let me ask you a question, major network who owns a zillion of the top podcasts. Do you require or even ask your hosts to like publish on their personal social media feeds to promote the show? And they're like, no. Yeah. That's a nice to have if they do. It's a bonus for us. I'm like, are you you're crazy? You're missing. That is like your most important opportunity, and you're not like requiring that. If you were a record label, you would absolutely have in writing that your musicians like have to post on their TikTok and Instagram. That's the entire business now, and they're still thinking 90s radio.
Yeah.
So instead of so here's the hack. Instead of going to the marketing manager, you go to the head of creator partnerships.
Totally.
Who's probably like 28.
Yep.
Is chronically online.
Yep.
And you're going to say, hey, we've got a really interesting opportunity. Brand new account, already doing 3 million impressions on Instagram a month. We're projecting 10 million by next month. They're like, where do we sign?
Yeah.
And they're not thinking quarterly budgets. They're like, and they're so used to dealing with awful creators who are all over the place, a lot of knuckleheads. So if you just come to them with like a little bit of a buttoned up approach, and it's the same amount of dollars.
It works. And it's also in like a lot of creator folks are trying to like, or people who manage creators are trying to get creators that they manage to start podcasts because they recognize that like, hey, these are clips, like this is content. This is like a great new mechanism. And so I think like super smart approach to go through them and not through.
And they'll do a deal in 48 hours. There's no like.
I was going to say something similar. That's such a good model. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. What do you see? Well, let me ask you this question. We'll start to kind of wrap on this shortly. But what do you think you guys are seeing at Listener that no one else sees from a data standpoint right now?
You know, one thing that just happened organically is we're working with a lot of sports media companies, and it's, as much as it is ironic, it makes sense because sports media historically has been, like, they've adopted new technology and new ways of distribution very early, from sports being on television to radio announcers. And at its core, like, sports media has always been ahead of the curve. And when I think about companies like John Boy Media, and we met them through the Barstool sports team, and it was, it was funny. We gave this whole pitch to Barstool, and they're like, hey, we love what you're doing, but we kind of build all this stuff internally, but here's like XYZ people that I think you should talk to. And very grateful for the intros. And when we met with John Boy, it's like one thing for them that I think we see a lot of that is, I think we've talked about this, is like in the podcast world, companies like Barstool, and think about Barstool as like this media brand that you should be having as your own. It's like your profile where you're not only posting clips, but you're posting like other pieces of content. In sports media, I'm saying this where John Boy might have 1 million followers on Instagram and put out 1,000 pieces of content a month, but only 100 of those clips might be actual podcast content that is relevant to how they're measuring against it. And I think what we've seen a lot of now is some of the biggest publishers that have those like creator first media brands that introduce podcasts, like their viewership and just the growth of what we call cluster data is exponential versus if you just have accounts that are just for clips. And obviously that's the unfair advantage where they can produce and publish all their content within this channel that already has lots of followers and engagement. Yep. But for us, we launched something ironic to the name, but Listener AI, where internally you can kind of ask questions. Hey, like which clips are performing the best? Which platforms are growing the quickest? And I think for us, the ability to see 40 shows across one network and say, hey, this month for this show, we put out 50 pieces of content that are tracked on this show. This one we did 12. This is growing at a 3 times the pace. I think we see a lot of examples and data points like that of just, the output really matters. But most importantly, it's like, how do you measure effectively for what brands care about? And that's what we're always, trying to figure out at its core. But to be direct with it, I think what we see is more of the, where the puck is going, right? Because my thesis is we talk and integrate with all of the native hosting platforms. And slowly, I think we're kind of meeting in the middle where companies like Acast or Beehive, who we love and respect, it's like new entrants that are creator first. I'll back it up. Creator first shows tend to be more successful versus like podcasts trying to beat creators. And that's this industry standard, I think. I think there's a whole new opportunity of companies like Beehive. They just launched podcasting as a hosting platform. And I think they're going to be so innovative in the space, just how creators launching podcasts on the content front are innovative because they get creators. The newsletter business is much more transparent, open rates, like ad network. So I'm extremely bullish on like seeing that thesis come to life of like, wow, new entrants and creator first tech platforms to the media itself. I think they're going to be a lot of disruptive to what we're talking about today. And you see that with TBPN on the content side to Beehive on the tech side.
Mm-hmm. What are you seeing that you think no one else sees right now?
I think there's a couple things. I mean, some of it is that what we've already talked about, which is just like, and Jake, you and I have talked about this a ton, which is just like, podcasts went from an audio medium to like slowly becoming a video first, like YouTube centric medium. And that was a couple of years ago. And now we're in the short form era of podcasting. And that's where the industry's going. And obviously audio, long form is still going to be a thing, but like it is a short form medium, short form video medium. And like that is something people haven't quite gotten yet. And it will only become more and more true. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting on the sports media front. Like we're working with we work with Barstool. We work with a lot of sports media companies. One of the reasons they need overlap so much is their content. Like when they record a podcast, they need clips out right now. Like, and if they don't get a ton of clips out right now, in 3 hours, the clips are irrelevant, or they're not part of the conversation on social. So like speed is like super key for them. And we've just seen also like the faster you get clips out, if there's anything timely that you're talking about, the more likelihood you have of getting into whatever algorithmic snowball is going on social around a conversation. And so it's not only volume, but like speed is a really key thing of like, you want to get your clips out as soon as you can.
Yeah. It almost is over the last, decade, I would say, it's felt so overwhelming as a brand to think like, I need to be this like always, not always on necessarily, but always involved. And if there's even like one day that I'm not in the conversation and like a valuable member contributing that conversation on social, then I like immediately fall to the bottom, and you're just going to always be there 24/7. It's so much. It's so overwhelming. How do you get a dozen clips out from a recording right now, all posted within the next 3 hours? I still have to eat lunch. Like I have 6 other meetings today. Like how does a team do that? And I think that was always really reserved for the like big budget news and sports companies only, because one, they had to turn stuff around that fast, and they would have like in their contracts like no revision time, no edits, just fucking record out, or it's live. But now, thankfully, shout out to both you guys, like we're at the beginning of like, there are tools that actually can do stuff that human beings cannot do volume wise and speed wise, that make it far less overwhelming. They make it just normal now. And like we're at the bare beginning of that. We need to be using this stuff, not only to like remain in the conversation, but if you're building a brand, you're a thought leader, you're a creator, whatever, like you need to be leading that conversation always. And if the second you're not, like you're just old news now, and that's just a harsh reality of this market. If you don't like that, the fuck out of here.
Yeah. And I think too, like shout out to you and what your team are doing at Thursday Labs. It's like we can be over here building for customers and teams, but and I experienced that a little bit on the personal podcast run, but to be taking advantage of tools and being able to like test with things. I think that's where so many content publishers, from people that produce shows to people who are just starting an individual show, they just get in their own way. It's like they're overwhelmed with the amount of tools. They've heard X company or X tool doesn't work for them, or it's like from our relationship, and I think that's shared true to you, is like you're testing and you're experimenting, and if you find something that works, like you got to lean in and kind of grow with the people, because it's very emerging on all fronts, from the tech that can service this to the content formats that you need to evolve into. And I think it's kind of what the industry is feeling overall, is like the need for not only partnerships, but things that work for them today and that will evolve. And I think that's what podcast didn't do for a while, is like evolve to the times with speed in mind. It was like they were baked into this identity, and now they just went from 3 on the treadmill to 15, and they're sprinting to catch up. And some of them are doing well, but it's a fast race, and the people that have fully adopted it are already miles ahead. So yeah, that's Closing thought on my end.
Yeah, thanks, man. For you, if you could in 30 seconds leave like one fucking nugget of awesome free game for a host or someone who runs a company and wants to really grow and see this as not only like a great medium, podcasting, but also
Yeah.
really efficient medium, what would you say to them? And it's
Uh,
okay if you're repeating something we already got to.
Yeah, I mean, I would say have many different accounts running. Have clip accounts. Obviously, like, overlap is great for like doing this without hiring someone else to do it. But like, you can have, a Instagram clips account, a YouTube clips account. We even have a bunch of customers who have like these Facebook clips accounts that are ripping and also making them a lot of money. But just have these accounts going on autopilot. No one even needs to know that like it's like associated with your main brand. But you'll learn a lot. People will come up to you and they'll say, "Hey, I saw this clip," and it will be like a AI created and posted clip, and you'll increase awareness and you can also make some money.
Thank you guys.
Yeah,
This was
thank
fun.
you for putting this together.
was
This is
great.
great. Absolutely.